Fifth myth is this idea that Crimea was always Russian. Um, Again, a commonly held view amongst Western historians of Crimea or Western historians of Russia. This assumes that it's actually a very racist approach to this, to Crimea, because it assumes that the history of Crimea only began when these so-called civilized Russians arrived in 1783. Prior to that, we'll ignore that history. This is simply not true. We would not declare that the history of, shall we say, Australia began in 1770 when Captain Cook arrived, or we wouldn't declare that the history of the United States began with the founding of Jamestown in 1607, or Canada with the founding of Quebec in 1604. There were obviously people already living in those areas, just as there were also people living in Crimea prior to the Russian invasion. And therefore, the history of those territories and of Crimea should be undertaken for a longer period of time. This makes Crimea not always having been Russian, because Crimean history began long before the Russian Empire annexed the place, occupied the peninsula in 1783. It's incredible the degree to which Western historians of Russia and Crimea have actually adopted the Russian imperialist and nationalist framework when writing about Crimea as a kind of a Russian territory, as always having been Russian. If we regard that kind of approach to, say, United States, Canada, or Australia as being racist because it denies the history of the First Nations who lived there before, the native peoples who lived there before, then this is also a racist history when applied to Crimea, because it denies the fact that there were other people other than Russians living in Crimea prior to 1783.